In the late 1980s, China was undergoing a silent transformation that was as profound as it was spectacular. It is estimated that more than 300 million people left their villages to seek opportunities in the cities, the largest human migration in history. Families fled rural poverty and moved en masse so that their children could study, women could work, and previously unimaginable dreams could come true. This exodus, however, was only possible thanks to a larger process. China was opening up to the world. In 1987, the international financial market felt the impact of a sudden collapse in the United States, the infamous Black Monday. Although China was still far from its current state, this external shock served as an opportunity. The Beijing government saw in this shock an opportunity to accelerate economic reforms. It quickly began to encourage foreign investment, create special economic zones, and allow Western capital to circulate with fewer restrictions. In coastal cities, the pace of construction reached frenetic levels. Shanghai, which for decades had been overshadowed by more traditional centers like Beijing and Guangzhou, began a frenetic race to modernize. Trillions of yuan were invested in infrastructure, factories, housing, and especially in skyscrapers that seemed to touch the sky. The urban skyline changed radically. 20-story buildings became obsolete overnight. Concrete gave way to glass and steel, and the dream of verticality became a symbol of a country on the rise. This urban generational process was not only economic, it was social and cultural. Millions of peasants became workers, merchants, young university students, and professionals. The children of migrants began to occupy universities, modern offices, and research centers. China was leaving behind its past of hunger and scarcity and embracing its future with unprecedented speed and ambition. It was in this same context that the need arose for a building that would represent this new era. The country no longer wanted just buildings. It wanted symbols. Symbols of a rhythm that never stopped, of a mentality that accepted no limits, of a culture that reinvented itself without forgetting its origins. At the center of this was Shanghai, ready to become the great financial star of Asia, and perhaps even the world. This was the perfect stage for the dream of the Shanghai World Financial Center to begin to take shape. No longer just a tower, a construction designed to reflect the spirit of a fast-paced, ambitious nation capable of crossing geographic, economic, and symbolic boundaries. China was no longer just building buildings. It was rebuilding itself, brick by brick, towards the sky. As Shanghai transformed into an open-air construction site, one project began to attract attention among so many others. It was not just another tall building. It was a concept, a bold idea born of an even greater desire to make the city the new financial heart of Asia. To do this, it was not enough to build another building. It was necessary to create an icon, something that would communicate to the world that China was no longer imitating foreign models, but leading its own narrative of power. This was the starting point for the Shanghai World Financial Center, or SWFC. The project was not conceived by a Chinese architect or a state-owned company. It emerged from an unlikely meeting of three worlds: a Japanese tycoon, an American architect, and a Chinese city in the midst of reinvention. Minoru Mori, one of the most influential real estate entrepreneurs in Japan, was known for believing that architecture should have a soul. For him, buildings should be more than just functional structures. They should carry meaning. Inspired by Eastern philosophy, Mori wanted to build something that represented the harmony between man and the universe. When he looked at Shanghai, he saw fertile ground for this symbol. On the other side of the project was William Peterson, an architect and partner at the renowned New York firm Kohn Peterson Fox. His mission was clear: to design the tallest skyscraper ever built in China. But the challenge was much more than technical. It was cultural. Peterson needed to translate into steel and glass a concept that combined Chinese tradition, Eastern spirituality, and the modern aggressiveness of emerging capitalism. It was then that the idea came about. A building that combined the square, symbol of the earth in Chinese philosophy, with the circle representing heaven. The proposal was simple and deeply symbolic. The building would rise in straight, solid lines, representing the physical and material world, until it opened at the top with a circle that would represent the spiritual connection with the universe. It would not be just a tall building. It would be a bridge between the earthly and the sacred, between the ancient and the future, between East and West. The design began to take shape, a robust, elegant body, with lines that rose toward the sky like a river flowing toward its destination. At the top, a circular void. Not just any void, but a gateway to the moon, inspired by the traditional entrances to Chinese gardens. This circle, in addition to being aesthetic and symbolic, would also have a practical function: to allow winds to pass through the top of the tower, reducing structural pressure and increasing the building's safety on stormy days. For the creators, everything was in place: art, culture, engineering, and spirituality in perfect harmony. But what seemed to be a triumph of symbolic thinking and visionary architecture was about to face an unexpected obstacle. An obstacle that didn't come from gravity or engineering calculations, but from the wounds still open in the memory of a people. The architectural proposal for the Shanghai World Financial Center seemed impeccable. The circle at the top was much more than an aesthetic detail. It was the soul of the project, a symbol of the sky, of harmony, a gesture of respect for ancient Chinese culture. But in a society marked by historical wounds, meanings do not always follow obvious paths. It was precisely this circle designed to connect the building to the universe that sparked a conflict that threatened the future of the entire project. When the first renderings of the building were released, the public's reaction was not one of amazement. It was one of indignation. Many Chinese saw in that circle a disturbing echo. The shape was uncomfortably reminiscent of the Japanese flag. A perfect disc, cutting through the sky above a Chinese tower, and the project, it is worth remembering, was financed by a Japanese tycoon. The interpretation fell like an emotional bomb. It was not just a question of design, it was a question of memory. During World War II, Japan invaded China and left a trail of destruction and deep trauma, especially in the episode known as the Nanjing Massacre. Even though the younger generations had not experienced this pain directly, it still pulsated in family stories, history books, and national sensibilities. The idea of a Japanese sun hovering over Shanghai, on top of the building that would symbolize the city's rebirth, was seen by many as a conscious or unconscious affront. The controversy grew on the networks, in newspapers, in academic and political circles. The project, once celebrated for its boldness, became a symbol of disrespect for many. Groups began to pressure the government. Symbolic demonstrations emerged. Until the unthinkable happened, the circle would have to be removed. The decision was difficult. William Peterson resisted. For him, the circle had no connection with Japan. It was part of a Chinese tradition, a tribute to the culture that he had studied so diligently to represent. But it was no use. The public outcry was greater than any technical or artistic argument. Even Minoru Mori, initially reluctant, eventually accepted that, for the project to survive, it would have to adapt. The solution was to transform the circle into a square with sloping corners. It still allowed the flow of wind, still maintained a certain symbolic value. After all, the square also carries a strong spiritual weight in Chinese tradition. But it broke the visual similarity that had caused so much discomfort. The architecture bent, not to the wind, but to the collective sensibility of a nation in reconstruction. The episode revealed something essential about architecture in delicate historical contexts. Buildings are not just the works of engineers and architects, they are also objects of memory, politics, and identity. And in 21st century China, where the past still echoes loudly, even a detail at the top of a skyscraper can rekindle ghosts that no one dares to forget. When the debate over the design finally calmed down and the circle gave way to the square, the Shanghai World Financial Center seemed ready to finally get off the ground. The construction site was in full swing. The foundations began to be dug. The initial structures were being erected. Shanghai followed each step with anticipation. The project was gigantic, audacious, and promised to redefine the city's skyline. But, as with so many other great construction stories, reality soon imposed a new obstacle. In 1997, Asia was plunged into a devastating financial crisis. Within months, entire markets collapsed, currencies plummeted, companies went bankrupt, investors fled in panic. The bubble that had inflated regional growth burst violently. China, although less exposed, also felt the impact. And among the silent victims of the crisis was the ambitious Shanghai skyscraper. Construction was halted indefinitely. The ground was exposed. The hole in the foundations became a symbol of economic uncertainty. For years, what was supposed to be the city's financial heart remained a concrete skeleton waiting for answers. Many believed that the project would never be resumed. But in 2003, with the economy recovering, eyes turned to the SWFC. There was a new urgency. Shanghai needed to reaffirm its position as a rising financial center. But there was a problem. The original design, frozen for almost a decade, was obsolete. The world had changed. Expectations had changed. And to make matters worse, the foundations were already in place, based on old calculations. The mission was now almost impossible. How to build a bigger and bolder building using the same foundations that already existed. That was when a legendary name in engineering entered the scene. Leslie E. Robertson, the same engineer responsible for the Twin Towers in New York. Robertson accepted the challenge with coolness and creativity. He knew that the secret was not to use more force, but to use less weight. He developed a lighter structure, redesigned the internal support systems, and proposed innovative solutions to redistribute the stress without overloading the foundation. The building, which would have been tall, would now be even taller, but with 10% less weight. This redesign required not only precise calculations, but also courage. Many of the solutions were novel, risky, and required absolute precision in their execution. Robertson and his team introduced diagonal bracing systems, new metal trusses, and thinner, lighter reinforced concrete walls. This was cutting-edge engineering applied under full pressure. And it worked. With the structure redefined and the problems overcome, the project resumed with a new spirit. It was no longer just a construction project that had been interrupted. It was now a living example of resilience, adaptation, and human ingenuity. The tower, which had nearly been buried by the crisis, was reborn stronger, ready to challenge the Shanghai sky and prove that the greatest obstacles sometimes come from the ground below, not from the top we aim to reach. After years of controversy, financial crises, and bold technical decisions, the Shanghai World Financial Center was finally complete. In 2008, the tower was proudly inaugurated. Rising 492 meters high, with 101 floors and a rectangular cutout at the top, the building was no longer just an urban dream. It was a reality of steel, glass, and cutting-edge engineering. But in the world of mega-constructions, glory is fleeting. When the SWFC was completed, it was no longer the tallest in the world. That title had been taken by Taipei 101 in Taiwan, completed in 2004 at 508 meters. A few months after its inauguration in Shanghai, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai would take the absolute throne, surpassing 800 meters in height. The vertical race, as always, waited for no one. Even so, the SWFC achieved something rarer than height. It won people's hearts. Instead of being called by its cold, technical name, the public soon gave it an affectionate and unusual nickname: the bottle opener. The square cutout at the top, so criticized in the past, was now seen with humor and affection. It was as if the population had transformed a symbol of tension into a gesture of lightness. This nickname, unexpectedly, humanized the giant. The building ceased to be an abstract monument and became part of the city's emotional landscape. Tourists took photos jokingly of the resemblance. Replicas of the building were sold as souvenirs. The spiritual skyscraper, designed to be a bridge between heaven and earth, also became a bridge between the grandiose and the everyday. Over time, China has begun to rethink its obsession with height. In 2021, the Chinese government announced restrictions on the construction of extremely tall skyscrapers. Projects that exceeded 500 meters were now banned, and those that exceeded 250 meters would be subject to strict evaluation. The decision was not just aesthetic or environmental, it was a declaration of a change of direction. The country that sought to prove its greatness to the world through colossal buildings now wanted to consolidate its leadership in another way. Even in the face of these new guidelines, the SWFC remains standing, not just as a tower, but as a story. It has survived economic crises, cultural conflicts, extreme re-engineering, and even oblivion. It has become a symbol of Chinese resilience, of the fusion of tradition and modernity, of the ability to adapt to the unexpected. The building was never the tallest for long, but it may have been one of the most significant, because deep down, it represents something that few buildings can represent: the complex, contradictory, and exciting process of a country trying to find its identity in the 21st century. Between heaven and earth, between past and future, between pain and pride, the Shanghai World Financial Center stands as a silent witness, always looking upwards, but with roots deep in history. The Shanghai World Financial Center is not just one tower among many. Its floors carry a story of resistance, reinvention, and scars that have never been forgotten. Every inch of its structure was shaped by difficult choices, cultural clashes, and the obstinacy of those who refuse to give up in the face of the impossible. If this story touched you in any way, if at any time you felt pride, surprise, or even indignation, then this video fulfilled its role: to remind you that behind every building, there is a soul, a memory, an invisible struggle that deserves to be told. Now, we want to hear your voice. Which part of this story impacted you the most? Do you believe that architecture can truly heal or reopen wounds from the past? Leave your opinion in the comments. Your perspective is an essential part of this conversation. And if you want to continue exploring exciting stories like this, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell. This helps us immensely to continue bringing narratives that connect the past to the present, the technical to the emotional, the human to the colossal. See you in the next story.